Welcome to a place where silence speaks louder than screams, and truth always finds its moment. This channel uncovers the stories families try to bury, the quiet betrayals, the carefully planned exits, and the strength that rises after abandonment. Here, manipulation hides behind smiles, loyalty is tested by blood, and love is pushed to its breaking point. These are stories of control disguised as care, of husbands who chose distance over responsibility, and of survival that refused to stay invisible. Each story unfolds slowly, revealing shocking secrets, raw emotions, and the kind of revenge that never needs to shout. No dramatics, no exaggeration, just real moments where dignity becomes power and truth becomes unavoidable. If stories of resilience, exposure, and perfectly timed justice pull you in, then you're exactly where you belong. Stay close because some pasts don't stay buried, and some endings are more satisfying than anyone expects. Control rarely announces itself. It slips into conversations disguised as concern, wrapped in soft warnings and practical advice. The first signs appeared in the way invitations were managed, how visits were timed, how decisions slowly stopped being shared. Behind closed doors, a mother curated a version of family that placed herself at the center, guarding reputation and inheritance like secret ground. Every choice the husband made began passing through her filter. Questions about finances were framed as fears. Late-night feedings were labeled burdens. Responsibility was rebranded as entrapment. Loyalty, according to her, meant obedience, not to vows, but to blood. The pressure never sounded cruel, it sounded reasonable, it sounded loving, and that was the most dangerous part. Private conversations happened without witnesses. Promises were whispered about freedom and restored status. Subtle reminders followed of everything that could be lost by staying: family businesses, future security, approval. The message was consistent. Walking away would not be abandonment, it would be protection, not cowardice, but sacrifice for the greater good. The husband changed slowly. Warmth cooled. Affection became obligation. Decisions that once felt shared turned unilateral. Eye contact shortened, silence stretched longer than words. When doubts surfaced, they were met with rehearsed answers, as if someone else had written the script. The influence was invisible, yet unmistakable. What hurt most wasn't the leaving, it was the preparation for it. Bank accounts adjusted quietly, important documents went missing, conversations about the future suddenly excluded certain names. Even grief was anticipated and dismissed in advance. The plan required emotional distance long before physical absence, and it worked perfectly. The final push came wrapped in maternal tears, claims of illness, fear of public embarrassment, a warning that staying would destroy everything the family had built. Faced with a choice between being a son or being a man, the decision revealed itself clearly. One role felt safer, one required less courage. When departure finally came, it carried the calm of something long rehearsed. No arguments, no explanations, just absence. Behind it stood a woman satisfied with her victory, believing control had secured the future and erased the inconvenient truth of betrayal. But secrets rot when sealed too tightly, and loyalty built on lies always collapses under the weight of truth. Weakness doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like silence, hesitation, and choices delayed until someone else makes them easier. The vows spoken once had sounded solid, full of certainty. Yet, when pressure crept in from the shadows, those promises thinned, stretched, and finally tore without a fight. The husband began retreating long before leaving. Conversations lost depth, answers turned vague. Affection felt scheduled, not sincere. Every disagreement ended the same way, with withdrawal instead of resolution. Love was no longer something defended, it became something avoided, and avoidance became his greatest habit. Manipulation found fertile ground in insecurity. Each whispered doubt fed an existing fear of failure. Each warning about responsibility struck at pride. Being told that staying meant losing ambition, freedom, and respect slowly reshaped his thinking. Distance started feeling like self-preservation rather than betrayal. That lie became easier to live with than accountability. There were nights when guilt surfaced, visible in restless movements and forced calm. Eyes lingered on sleeping faces a moment too long, as if memorizing something already chosen to abandon. Apologies hovered on his lips, but never crossed them. Words would have required courage. Silence required nothing at all. The most shocking secret wasn't the leaving, it was the preparation. Private plans were made quietly, legal advice sought without transparency, a future designed where responsibility no longer existed. He rehearsed explanations meant to justify absence, convincing himself that emotional detachment was temporary, necessary, even kind. In truth, it was cowardice wrapped in logic. Distance hardened him. Missed milestones were dismissed as unavoidable. Birthdays passed unnoticed. Each ignored moment added weight to the guilt he pretended not to feel. Yet pride refused to let him return. Admitting wrong would mean facing what was broken, and who broke it. Publicly, he played the role of the misunderstood man. Privately, regret followed closely, though never close enough to force action. The truth stayed buried under routine, distraction, and the comforting lie that time would erase damage. He believed absence would fade into memory. But guilt has patience. It waits for exposure. It waits for the moment when silence no longer protects and distance no longer hides the consequences of choosing weakness over love. And one day, that truth finds its voice. Survival never looked heroic in the beginning. It looked like exhaustion hidden behind routine, like learning how to stretch silence into strength. Days blurred together with no witnesses, no applause, just the steady work of keeping everything afloat after being deliberately left behind. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was cold, methodical, and designed to erase responsibility without leaving fingerprints. What stung most was the knowledge that the abandonment wasn't impulsive. It was planned, calculated. The husband hadn't simply disappeared, he had exited with intention, believing distance would rewrite the narrative. Every missed call, every ignored message carried the same message. The past was meant to stay buried, and survival was never meant to be seen. But survival has a way of sharpening truth. Opportunities emerged quietly. A support group led to a community program. A community program led to a feature request. Suddenly, a story once confined to private pain was being framed as resilience. Cameras didn't arrive to shame or accuse. They came to document endurance, to show what happens when responsibility is abandoned and strength rises anyway. The television studio felt unreal. Bright lights, careful questions, producers nodding as if the truth deserved space. No names were spoken, none were needed. The story unfolded naturally. Betrayal without dramatics, abandonment without embellishment. A family left behind. A man who chose absence. A mother who believed control could outrun consequences. When the episode aired, silence broke in places it never had before. Messages poured in from strangers who recognized pieces of their own lives. Validation arrived without asking. The truth was no longer private property. It belonged to the public record now. Somewhere else, a man sat frozen, staring at a screen that reflected every choice made in secret. Faces once avoided now filled the room. Growth, once missed, now undeniable. The illusion that time erases damage shattered instantly. The past wasn't buried, it was speaking, clearly and without mercy. What shocked him most wasn't exposure, it was dignity. No bitterness, no blame, just facts, strength, and visible proof that abandonment doesn't destroy, it reveals. The secrets he'd protected so carefully unraveled in minutes, undone by honesty he never expected to face. That night, survival stopped being quiet, and the truth finally learned how to speak. Revenge never needed noise. Silence did the work far better. After everything was taken, dignity became the only possession no one could steal. No calls were returned, no explanations demanded, no scenes created for the satisfaction of those who expected collapse. Instead, space was given for truth to mature on its own timeline. The husband expected pursuit, expected anger, expected tears loud enough to justify the exit he'd planned so carefully. What followed instead was distance sharpened by purpose. Bills were paid without his name. Decisions were made without his permission. Life continued in a way that quietly dismantled the lie that survival depended on him. What remained hidden for years slowly surfaced. His absence wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Financial shortcuts taken without consent. Promises made elsewhere while vows sat abandoned. The image he protected so fiercely cracked under the weight of reality. Mutual friends began asking questions. Family members noticed inconsistencies. Stories no longer aligned. Success arrived without announcement. Stability replaced chaos. Confidence replaced waiting. Each small victory built something untouchable, while regret began circling the man who thought control meant power. He watched from a distance as everything he'd walked away from thrived without him. The narrative he relied on of being needed, irreplaceable, collapsed completely. No confrontation ever came because none was required. Truth found its audience naturally. The same people who once justified his absence now questioned it. The same silence he used as a weapon became the space where accountability echoed loudest. His secrets, once protected by distance, lost their shelter. The most devastating part wasn't being exposed, it was being irrelevant. Invitations stopped, opinions went unasked, access was gone, control evaporated. He realized too late that dignity is a form of power, and success without revenge speaks louder than any accusation ever could. Regret doesn't always announce itself with apologies. Sometimes it shows up as restlessness, as sleepless nights replaying choices that can't be undone, as watching from the outside while life moves forward without offering a way back in. No shouting ever happened, no begging ever followed, no chasing ever occurred. Just truth, standing tall, and a man forced to live with the cost of believing silence would erase what he broke. If this story moved you, stayed with you, or felt uncomfortably real, don't forget to like. It helps these voices reach further. Subscribe to stay connected to stories where truth always catches up and silence never wins. New episodes bring more hidden betrayals, quiet strength, and justice that arrives right on time. Until next time, remember, walking away doesn't erase the past, it just waits for the moment it's seen.